I struggle with some demons. I struggle with some challenges, some things personally I'm working through right now. So it makes it hard from time to time, especially when either people put me on a pedestal that maybe I don't belong, or I, have a tendency of putting myself on a pedestal at times, and that ego gets in the way. But I will say that I have lost sight of my spiritual development over the past couple of years. And because of that, I'm experiencing some personal hardships and have been humbled in a way by God. And am realizing now that I am insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Important, sure, a lot of self-worth, but insignificant in the grand scheme of his design.
And make your escape. Hey, welcome back. We are glad you're here. Don't touch that dial. You are in the right place if you're looking for inspiration, motivation, encouragement. We have it for you here at Last in Line Podcast, where we are teaching guys how to not only charge the mountain and be the tip of the spear in leadership, but also to be the kickstand that props people up and empowers and encourages other leaders to be the best version of the leader within them. We are all leaders. We all have influence. And as it says in Mark 9:35, he who wants to be first will be last of all and servant of all. That's what Last in Line Podcast is about. And I hope you walk away different than when you turned on this podcast. I hope you walk away with the revelation that you were called to lead, that you were called to have influence, and that you were called to serve. Hey, today I want to welcome to the stage Ryan Michler from Order of Man, the podcast, the movement, the Iron Council founder, two-time author who is releasing his second book in less than 30 days from the time we're recording this. Ryan has a long track record in this space, and he has got 25 million downloads of his podcast. He's got 600,000 followers, social media. So pretty monumental, magnificent presence he has in the space. And so it's my honor to bring him back for the second time. And we're going to talk a little bit about his book. We're going to talk about some of the things Ryan's been going through lately. He's in recovery rehab of an injury. Excited to dive into his spiritual side as well, which we don't always get to hear a lot about, but refreshingly, he has been talking a lot more about that. The last 4 or 5 guests he's had, it's come up a couple times. And so that's what I love about Ryan's podcast and him as a man, is he's not afraid to be outspoken and transparent about different things that most ordinary men might not talk about. So I'm grateful to have Ryan Michler back on the podcast. He is, like I said, you got to go get his book. It's called The Masculinity Manifesto. It's coming out in the next few weeks, so you got to go get a copy of that. But I am privileged to welcome back for an encore presentation of Mr. Ryan Michler from the Order of Man podcast. Well, it's an honor to have Ryan Michler back for a second time on Last in Line Podcast. Ryan, welcome again, sir.
What's going on, man? Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. I like we were talking about off camera, you kind of came out of your physical situation, your rehab, your surgery you had. Tell us a little bit about that recovery, because I know it had to be somewhat trying along the way.
It wasn't too bad. I ended up tearing my pectoral tendon. I complete rupture of my pectoral tendon. And so, I've been dealing with the fallout from that for several months. About 8 or 9 weeks ago, I had surgery, got out of the sling about 5 weeks ago, and have just been working, still doing my workouts, still training, things like that. Not much jujitsu, until about last week, I started training again, and I go back tonight. So we'll see how it does tonight.
That's good. Now you're back on the road. It sounds like. Well, man, I'm glad you came on. We've got something exciting to talk about as your second book launches here in a few, days, weeks, very soon. But I got to talk to you about your growth to this point, because it's been crazy, almost like a hockey stick, if you will, versus a standard bell curve where people kind of peak and then they come down and there's this plateau. And man, you just kind of rocket shipped the last 7 years. And I know it hasn't been always smooth sailing and it wasn't overnight, but man, talk about just kind of the things you're proud of to this point and anything that surprised you maybe about yourself or this journey or just the response to your movement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of all of it. It's been, like you said, a pretty incredible ride over the past 7 years. I didn't really expect that when we started this, that's what it would be. But it's a testament to the fact that guys need other men in their lives. And I'm actually in the midst of that right now with some own personal struggles I'm dealing with. And, I know a lot of people look at me and think, well, man, this guy's got it all figured out. His family life's on point. His personal decisions are on point. His business is on point, and it's just not the case. It's like I struggle with some demons. I struggle with some challenges, some things personally I'm working through right now. So it makes it hard from time to time, especially when either people put me on a pedestal that maybe I don't belong, or I, have a tendency of putting myself on a pedestal at times, and that ego gets in the way. So, what's interesting is as I've dealt with some things that I'm dealing with over the past month or so, I've had a lot of conversations with some close personal friends of mine. And it's really interesting to see a lot of these guys experiencing their own issues and similar issues that I had no idea about. And I've just come to the conclusion that all of us are struggling in some way as men. That could be emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. We're all struggling in some way, and yet none of us talk to each other about it. We don't pick up the phone. We don't knock on somebody's door. We don't call another guy up. We don't fellowship these other men. And so we're all walking around with our personal challenges and traumas and baggage and bull crap, and none of us are talking to each other. And I think that's why Order of Man has done so well over the past 7 years. But there needs to be more. And I'm recommitting to not changing what we're doing, but doubling down our effort on not making it seem like I have it all figured out, but that I'm along on the journey and the path with you guys who are tuning in, and we need to do a better job talking to each other. So it's been an interesting roller coaster of a ride, but excited that we can definitely help people.
Yeah, and you did, I think maybe even last week, released an episode about checking on your guys, and
right.
that was pretty meaningful to me because I've always been really bad at that, and I guess it's just one of those, it's almost false humility where you think nobody really has time for your junk, right? And you don't want to bother people. They're busy, and there's probably a whole other plethora of things that factor into that, but pride is a big one. But no, I'm glad you came out and talked about that. And I'm glad you bring that up now, because I really wanted to talk to you a little bit before we get into the book and some of the podcast stuff. Because I don't want this to be just another Ryan Michler interview where everybody asks you the same stuff every time. Like there's,
Sure.
We did that the first time you came on, but man, I think there's another layer, and you mentioned some things recently, little subtle comments, or maybe just things that I intuitively misassumed or misunderstood, but you tell me and correct me. But like you said, you're going through some things personally, but you've become almost as much of a student of your guests as we are in the audience. Like you're almost taking more notes than we are, it seems like, in the last few episodes. Now, granted, you've probably always done a little bit of that, but am I correct in thinking that maybe you're soaking in sometimes and feel like you're just as part of the audience as we are?
Yeah, I've always said I'm the biggest recipient of the work that we've been doing. I feel like those old Rogaine commercials where it's like, I'm not only the president, I'm a member, and that's how I feel, is like, I'm not only the host of the Order of Men podcast and quote unquote leader of the movement, but I'm a client. I'm the guy that needs the most help. So yeah, there probably has been a tone over the past month and a half or so where it's changed, where I've really become more receptive to and even asking more on a personal level than I may be for somebody else who might be tuning in. You used an interesting phrase a minute ago. You said false humility, but let's just call it what it is. It's arrogance. It's ego. It's not false humility. It's worse than that. It's ego. It's pride. It's arrogance. I've been in that boat, and I've succumbed to that in a lot of ways. Like I'm a product of my own making, in a way where we've had just this meteoric rise, like we were talking about, and I let that get to my head. So I'm trying to fix some things, man. And I'm trying to go back to our roots of saying, hey guys, I don't have it all figured out. I'm a student, as you said. I'm on the path with you. I've got my own stuff I struggle with, just like you do. I don't have any of this stuff figured out. I've got some things figured out,
for sure.
but I have a lot of things that I'm very immature on and still learning.
Yeah, and I'm glad you. So to go a little deeper on that, for a guy that's listening right now, that I guess, what are some triggers that maybe you could have avoided, or were there some signs along the way that maybe you missed out on? And guys, I'm talking about guys that maybe are a step away from this, part that maybe you fell into for a minute. You were aware enough to at least to acknowledge that you were having some challenges, but were there any triggers, if you could look back to where this journey kind of started in the last, you said 4 or 5 weeks, where you're like, I could have probably noticed that as a trigger or a red flag or about yourself at all? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm just shooting off it's a good question. I haven't thought about that really too much, but I would say one thing that I can do a better job at, and I think a lot of other men could consider, is just, like I said, check in with your people. Now, when I did that podcast, I was talking about making sure that your brothers are good. They might be struggling. You don't know. But what I'm saying now, in addition to that, is check in with your people. So your wife, your kids, your colleagues, your clients, your coworkers, the people that are in your life, and evaluate from your perspective how they're doing, right? Isn't it our job to serve and lead and make sure everybody's is good and make sure they're doing okay physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? A lot of the times we overlook these things as men because we get so consumed with our own personal ambitions and desires that we fail to see what the people around us are experiencing. So if we could be a little bit more cognizant and aware of what they're experiencing just through observation, but also through engagement with them. When's the last time you had a really good conversation with one of your employees about their life, not just their performance? When's the last time you had some alone time with one of your children? I have 4 children, so getting alone time with my wife or one of my 4 children is hard, but it's not so hard that I couldn't have carved out time of my day to be able to go on a drive even for 20 minutes or, play catch with one of my sons or draw with my daughter or wrestle with my youngest son who loves to do that. And that gives me an opportunity to check in on him. Same thing with your wife. Are you checking in on her? What's she dealing with? What's she struggling with? What is she going through? And what can you do to support her in those challenges? I think that's a big thing that we can do. We get so self-absorbed, and this goes back to the ego thing. Like, I'm the most important thing. And that actually is one of the messages that I see as an underlying trend among men's movements, that you got to fix you and work on you. And yes, that is true. But if it comes at the expense of other people, then you've taken it too far. And so some triggers that we can do a better job looking at are the people around us and how they're responding to us, and if they're getting what they need, because ultimately we do want to serve. That's kind of the point of life, is to serve other people.
Yeah. And I mean, I would be, I don't have the data, but I would bet nearly every episode that you do, I almost want to say with a guess, but let's just say of the 3 in the week, the word serve comes out of your mouth at least 2 or 3 times. Like you're very focused on that. I don't think you ever lost sight of that, but you had a quote and I can't give you an exact episode, but it stood out to me enough to where I wrote it down. So you said fulfillment is marked by leadership and service, to our point that we're making. So where would you give yourself, what grade would you give yourself on maybe a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most fulfilled? Where would you say you fall on that fulfillment scale right now?
That's an interesting question. The phrase, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Correct.
That's not always accurate. And what I mean by that is, I know for me as a hard charger and a high achiever, I could do very well in my business, for example, but struggle with my family. It's just naturally something I do. It's naturally something I think a lot of people listening would resonate with.
Yep.
So am I fulfilled in my work? Yeah, for sure. Family life. Yeah. Fulfilled. Um, so I don't think the right metric is to measure whether or not I'm fulfilled. It's really the metric of if I'm doing a good job or not in that service. Right.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I don't know what it would be on a scale from 1 to 10. I guess I'd have to ask other people. I mean, that's for
Yeah.
them to decide, right? It's viewed through the lens of other people. Like I don't get to decide how well I'm serving other people. They get to decide that. They have a say in that.
That's a great point. I didn't think of it that way, but I think sometimes we do grade ourselves based on what we think that matrix looks like and say, okay, so I'm leading well here. I'm serving well here. Well, are you? What if we ask those 10 people you think you're serving, what would they say? So that's a great observation.
And look, I know my motives, right? I
Yeah.
know what I'm trying to do. I know where my heart is. I
That's
know
important.
how it is for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But ultimately, if it doesn't hit the mark in your professional or personal life, then so what? Does that matter? No, what
Yeah.
matters is that people actually know that you're leading them, serving them,
Yeah.
and helping them
That's
along their
good.
own path.
That's good. I mean, if I swing really hard, I really wanted to hit the ball, but if I don't hit it right, it wasn't lack of effort. It wasn't intent. It was just, I didn't execute. Right. So,
As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
good intentions.
So your
Yeah.
intentions are great. I mean, you got to have good intentions for sure. But if your tactics are off, then
Yeah.
intentions don't really mean much.
Well, speaking of intent and intentions, I guess, but lately I've noticed that you've talked a lot more about your faith recently. And I say more, not to say that you never do before, but it stands out to me. Maybe it's just me and I'm weird, but it seems like somewhat of the last handful or so guests you've had have brought that up quite a bit. And you have been transparent about your faith. And I don't know, has that been intentional? Just kind of a caveat question, but I'm interested to know, did that just kind of coincidentally happen, if you believe in coincidences, or is that something that you've been focused on? If we're mind, body, or spirit people, 3-part beings, is that some area that you've maybe been more intentionally focused on?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I got to say is you're very observant.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I mean, that's a mark of interest, a mark of care about what you do. And so I want to commend you and acknowledge and recognize you for that. You're very observant.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it's intentional, because if I say it like that, to me, it almost comes across as me trying to game using my faith. And I'm not at all. So I wouldn't say it's intentional in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I have lost sight of my spiritual development over the past couple of years. And because of that, I'm experiencing some personal hardships and have been humbled in a way by God. And am realizing now that I am insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Important, sure, a lot of self-worth, but insignificant in the grand scheme of his design. And that if I want to really lead well in the walls of my home and my business and the community, and I want to make good choices, and I want to be a man of integrity and honor, that I can't actually do that alone. That was the pride and the arrogance, and that I can't do it alone. And I'm just a humble servant as much as I can be, and realize that I'm not strong enough. I had a really good conversation with a friend last week sometime. And he said, Ryan, you're fighting a spiritual battle. It's a spiritual warfare. And you have your wooden sword and your wooden shield, and you're trying to fight this enemy with a wooden sword and a wooden shield. And this is a supernatural enemy that's fighting against you and your family and everything that you're trying to do. And you can't even see the enemy. That enemy has surrounded you, has flanked you, has snuck up on you, and you don't even know it's there. You don't even know what you're dealing. And you're swinging and flailing your wooden sword around as if you're actually going to do something against this enemy. And I'm realizing that I'm not. And instead of flailing around with the wooden sword and shield, that I got to get on my knees and pray. and I got to crack open that Bible, and I got to look at a devotional, and I got to go back to church, and I need to sing, and I need to praise and worship and rekindle and refine and recommit to that relationship with him, our God. So yeah, I have been talking a lot more about it because, again, I feel like over the past month or so, the conversations I've had are not coincidental,
Right.
but divinely inspired. And so what a great opportunity to talk with some incredible men about these issues I'm dealing with.
Yeah, and pretty timely, it sounds like. So, I mean, be grateful. We're all grateful that there's a side of you that we see that for whatever reason, that's not even important. But, the fact that you're not too proud when you start kind of beating yourself up a little bit about pride, you're not too proud to bring it out in the open and, hundreds and thousands and millions of followers and listeners. You're not too proud to share some of that. So, I mean, that's commendable, bro. That's admirable. And there needs to be more of that. So, we got to transition. So as we kind of transition into the podcast and the movement, I guess, as a whole, and I've heard your story, and you did a podcast in your other job, and you got tired of talking about money. And so you wanted to talk about something you were passionate about, but also something that you noticed there was a need for. Now, talk a little bit about, was it maybe because of your personal experience as a kid and you kind of saw what maybe there was a void somewhere regarding a man in the house and maybe a noble mentor. But when did you or what made you realize there was a need for this sort of healthy masculinity movement to kind of get out there and stand up for?
I actually didn't really know there was a need for that until after I started the Order of Man movement. When I started, it was very selfishly driven. I thought that I'd be able to have some good conversations with guys like yourself and others that I could learn from, and I could be a better father and a better husband and a better business owner as I was building my financial planning practice. So I actually started the podcast in the movement now at this point. It wasn't a movement then, but the movement at this point for very selfish reasons. And then as I started and developed and built it out, I realized very quickly that this is something a lot of men need. And then I started looking around at the problems in society and realized, a lot of these problems stem from a lack of manliness. So I really latched on to that. I was going to say messaging, but that's not right. I really latched on to that idea and that cause. Maybe that's the best way to say it. The cause of reestablishing manliness in culture and society today.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about framework and network, and it's interesting to kind of watch your journey and all the people that you sort of identified you wanted to glean off of, or maybe get close enough to sort of just pick up on a few things that they were doing well. And you did that, to the nth degree in a huge scale because your network is what it is now. So you learned a lot from, I don't know, PhD on the street, if you will, about some of the manliness, the masculinity, the things that were needed out there. I guess, was it a passion? I hate this term, but was it a passion project at first? And like you said, it was just sort of a self-needed knowledge that you were searching for information, but did it turn into this, dude, this is a big deal. This is a huge cause, like you, to use your word, this is a cause that's needed. And I'm a big part of this. Like, when did you realize I'm going to be a huge part of changing guys' lives for the better?
I don't like to think of it in that context because I'm trying not to prop myself up. Like, I'm going to be a huge part of this. It's just not about me.
Right.
And so I'm being, and then again, this goes back to our earlier conversation. Yeah. I'm trying to be very cautious of placing myself on some pedestal I don't belong.
Right.
So I want to shy away from the idea that I'm going to be a huge part of this global movement. And
I should have said your work. I should have said your work, the work that you're doing, maybe not Ryan Michler.
It's not even
right.
Yeah. It's the work, right? Yes, it's crucial. Yeah, it wasn't even a passion project of mine when I started. It was something that I'm like, man, this would be cool. This would be interesting. This would be fun. And I would learn some things along the way, but I never imagined it would turn into what it has. And that's presented all sorts of opportunities and all sorts of struggles as well. Things I didn't even realize, and the added pressure and stress of it, and and the pride that comes with it. So yeah, I Now, look, I'm not ignorant to the fact that we have helped through the work hundreds of thousands, if not millions of men do some tremendous things in their lives. And I want to continue to do that. And I want to make sure that I'm evaluating constantly the way that we're doing it. Are we doing this in the right manner? My motives have always been pure, meaning I want to serve, I want to help keep families together. I want young men to know what they need to know to be able to become contributing members of society. I want men to be able to thrive and excel in their businesses and their financial acumen. I want them to find a higher power that they can tap into and serve other people and that higher power effectively. I want all of that. I just want to be careful of wanting it for my own selfish desires and instead wanting it for the right reasons, which is just to help, man, just to help other people who are struggling.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I don't think anybody even perceives you to be the guy that's propping yourself up and claiming that you're the reason this all happened. Because you talk about it a lot, yes, it's about bigger than us and it's about some other things at play, but we still have to do the work. And so you still grind every day. You have for 7 years doing this. I wanted you to you've done this before, but for the listeners that maybe not have caught you doing this, talk about masculinity versus manliness and sort of the how we need to sort of compartmentalize those, right? Because you differentiate and distinguish between the two, and you word it so well. I could never do it. So give us a kind of a brief idea of how you came up with that, and well, not how you came up, but what does that look like? Masculinity versus manliness.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to get tripped up over semantics. So,
right.
We can agree or disagree on the word choice being used, but really what's most important is the concept. And I don't care if you want to interchange masculinity and manliness. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is we understand the concepts and the principles I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah.
And the concept is that masculinity is amoral. It's neither good nor bad. A lot of times people say we need masculine men and masculinity is toxic or masculinity is amazing. And it's actually neither. It's not toxic. It's not incredible. It has the power to be, sure. It also has the power to be destructive. I don't use toxic because that's a term that promotes a concept I don't agree with, but can it be destructive? Yeah, absolutely. Men have the propensity, for example, for violence. So if I was, I saw somebody, walking in an alley and I wanted to injure that person, I could use my propensity for violence to do that. Or if I saw a young woman walking alone at night and I wanted to exert my will over her, I could use my aptitude for violence to be able to do that. So is that effective use of masculinity?
Right.
No.
Right.
So I differentiate between masculinity, which is simply just our behaviors, characteristics, thoughts, based on our immutable characteristics, our biological makeup.
Yeah. That's where I was going with that. Yeah.
Our testosterone, mostly testosterone introduced in utero and also as heavy doses as we go through puberty.
Right.
Which is why, I'm looking at my 14-year-old son, and he's now taller than me. And he was standing next to his mom, my wife, the other day, today, in fact, and he just towers over her now, and so generally men are bigger.
Yeah.
They're stronger. I'm speaking in generalities, but generally men are bigger. They're stronger. They have a greater propensity for violence, for addictive behavior, for compulsion, for aggression, dominance, stoicism, competitiveness. These are all things that we inherently possess in greater degrees. Not that women can't be any of those things, but we as men generally possess in greater degrees because of our biological makeup. That's masculinity. That's all it is. Now, manliness is the way that you harness masculinity for productive outcomes. So if I'm, for example, see that attractive woman and I decide that I'm going to assault her, then that would be a misuse of masculinity. But if on the other hand, I saw somebody assaulting her and I went up and I physically interjected myself and stopped that from happening, then we would all say objectively, that's a proper and effective use of masculinity, which is what I would say is manly. That's manly behavior. So that's the difference, is how you use your masculinity to produce effective outcomes for the people in your life. loved ones, families, friends, even strangers, people you've never met before? Are you serving? Are you leading? Are you helping? And are you using your tools effectively to do so? The best analogy is I could take a hammer and I could find somebody, I could crack somebody over the head with that hammer, and that would do some real damage, potentially even kill that person. Or I can take that hammer and I can hammer 1,000 nails into some 2x4s and build an amazing home that a family can grow and raise kids and build a life together with. Yeah. So is the hammer bad or good?
Right.
No, it's just a piece of metal. It's just how you use it that really defines its whether or not it was effective.
Yeah, perfect. No, and you know, you can stop me as we go, because obviously we don't want to disclose the entire book as we're talking here, because I know that some of those masculine traits are probably in the latest book that's coming out. And I can't help but wonder, so those masculine traits, they're in us when we're born, and it's a matter of how our choice, you know, and the way that our propensity to use those traits, whether it bad or good. And so for those listening, I mean, this is not a biology, you know, class or a science class, but I think it's important that they know these are the traits you were born with. Now, how you use those are up to you. How you use those for good or evil, right? Because they can be used for either, is up to us. And so the manliness part, like you talk a lot about males and men, and so that's an obvious difference. But so I guess, are you personally, are there some things here that in the masculine traits, like, are you better at some versus the other? Like if a guy's listening and he's like, well, I kind of suck at, you know, this, using these for good, but I'm really good at these. Like, is there a way we get better at some of this, or is it just all a mindset in a heart condition?
Yeah, well, let's take violence, or propensity for violence. You know, are you going out and are you, you know, like I said, are you assaulting people, or even just maybe not violence, but even just anger? You know, a lot of men are angry. And so what are you doing with that anger? Are you yelling at people? Are you putting people down? Are you dominating? Are you manipulating? Are you, you know, exerting yourself or forcing that upon other people to make them feel bad or stupid? That's not a good use of our propensity for violence, and even our anger that we have.
Aggression, I guess, would be the word.
Aggression. That's a better, that's not a great use of that. But if we harness that aggression and we channel it towards building a business that's going to serve other people, then I would say that's a pretty good outlet. Or even going to jujitsu or practicing some form of martial arts so that you can become more capable should you find yourself in some sort of situation like that.
Yeah.
Well, then I would say that's an effective use of that. You know, focus is another one. Like, men have the ability to focus. And I think a lot of the times we get addicted to the things that we get focused on. And that's good and bad.
Yeah.
It could be addicted to drug and alcohol abuse, pornography, or it could be focused towards, again, building a business or building a family or working on a project around the house, but something that's going to be more productive than these destructive habits that we have a tendency of focusing on. So where do you direct that? Gambling is one I see a lot of guys get into. I mean, there's so many destructive behaviors that we fall prey to because we're focused on those things. And if we can harness that focus towards much more effective, healthy outlets, then of course we're going to have better lives. So these are things I've had to work on myself, you know, and it is a challenge. It is a struggle, but it's one worth fighting through.
No, I think it's interesting that I had never really thought of those, because you outlined 8 specific and you covered most of those. I just have never really dialed into those 8. And are those just ones you came up with, or are those just kind of the ones that are scientifically proven that we're all born with? Because this, you know, I guess the honesty and self-respect, like those are the kind of things that I wonder, are they automatically in us, or are those learned behaviors? Because I feel like the aggression and violence, is kind of built in masculine, manly guys, but is honesty and self-respect a trait that's just automatically there? I don't know. Is that crazy? Is that kind of a dumb question?
No, it's not a dumb question. It's an interesting thought. I'm pulling out not characteristics that are inherent. Some of them, yes, are inherent within us. And I used the 4 that I used are Dominance, aggression, stoicism, and competitiveness are the first four. And the order might be off a little bit, but those are the first four. And I use those because the American Psychological Association came out, and I can't remember the year right offhand, came out and did a quote unquote study about these characteristics that we would generally consider masculine.
Yeah.
And in that finding or that study, and I'm using that very loosely, they determined that these characteristics were inherently harmful, I believe is the word that they used. So when people say toxic masculinity, for example, and I say, no, masculinity is not toxic, what they're saying is, well, no, nobody's saying all masculinity is toxic. Well, is that true? Because the American Psychological Association, who is largely responsible for the way that we diagnose and treat young men and men in society, is actively peddling that idea.
Yep.
So if you're saying that nobody is saying that all masculinity is toxic, you're sadly mistaken. There are organizations, well-respected organizations in the medical community, the scientific community, making that assumption on faulty data. So yeah, I take issue with that. So the first four that I covered were a rebuttal to that, and to show and illustrate how we can use dominance, aggression, competitiveness, and stoicism for productive outcomes, that they are not inherently toxic.
Yeah.
The others are characteristics that you're not going to typically find in some sort of, self-help book that have been covered about, honor and integrity and discipline. And like, these things are important for sure. And I'm not discounting the importance of those virtues, but I wanted to talk about virtues that weren't really talked about a whole lot. And things that we could incorporate that would help you become a better man. It's interesting though. I was reading the book for the ebook, because there is going to be, the audiobook, because that option is going to be available. And I was reading a couple of chapters about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I was like, yep, I need that. Oh man, I'm not doing that. Oh my goodness. That's really good advice, but I'm not taking that advice. And it was kind of disheartening as I was going through it. I was like, man, here I am telling everybody what they can do to improve their lives. And I'm doing, like, if I was going to use that report card that you were saying earlier, it's like, I might be an 8 on one. And the next one I read, I'm like, dang, I'm a 2 on that one, or I'm a 4 on that one. And so I was a little disheartening as I was reading it, but also it was hopeful, because I thought to myself, well, as I try to get back on the path, I can use this, like the manual's already written, right. Like the plan's already there. And now it's just a matter of taking that advice and executing it.
Well, I agree. And I mean, with the Bible, I can read the same scripture that I read a year ago, and today it convicts the crap out of me. But a year ago, maybe it didn't speak as much. Like for you, you wrote this book, going on a year ago, I'm guessing, or it's been in the making for a while. So at the time you wrote it, maybe it wasn't as convicting to you as maybe the season you're in now. And so I don't know, that's just kind of anecdotally my take on that. But yeah, it could be that you were really good at those same things back then, but maybe something changed and you took your eye off the ball, maybe a little bit on certain ones, just like I do.
Or alternatively, and I don't think you're wrong on some of that, or alternatively, I could see it so clearly for and in other people, but I refuse to look at it for myself. There's an element of denial in that, right? I know that's something I've done and probably will continue to do throughout my life. I know that's something a lot of other men do, is they deny where they fall short, yet they could so easily recognize it in other people and offer advice. And so I've really had to analyze whether or not I was in denial about my own performance. And the honest, cold, hard answer is yes, absolutely.
100%. The person that says they've never done that or aren't doing that or won't do that ever in the future is lying. So anyway, you, to kind of round this out about the book, and tell us when it comes out for sure. Like, when's the drop?
It's the end of September 27th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, there's a little outline that, I got to say, by the way, your team is dynamite. Like, Brandy and the people that are involved in this whole thing, they're dynamite. So,
Oh yeah, they're
been
unbelievable.
very helpful. But
Good.
you have 4 key mindsets to overcoming barriers, okay, and reaching potential. You mentioned 4. Is it okay that we cover those, or do we got to wait 30 days on this?
Yeah.
You
No, we
good?
can cover whatever you
Okay.
want to cover. You tell me. I'll follow your lead.
No, no, these are important though. I think these are awesome. And I think you talk about these on a regular basis, indirectly or directly, but I'll just read them to you and you can take one for the sake of time, or you can nail them all. But overcome the ease of modernity. I've heard you say that a lot. These are overcoming mindsets, right? That we, to overcome barriers to reaching potential. So we got to overcome the ease of modernity. Don't be a superhero, which that one stung a little. Lead before the title. That one stung a little too. Render yourself obsolete. And I've heard you say that hundreds of times. And I in fact, am stealing that one. I've already stole it and I've used it a bunch. And my kids just kind of look at me like I'm nuts. But yeah, so I'm using some of this stuff in my daily life. Talk
Good.
about those and are you, obviously some of those relate to you directly because they do every guy, but which one stands out? Let's just start there. Which one kind of stands out to you as being like where the rubber really meets the road? Not that they all aren't, but.
Yeah, I mean, I really resonate most deeply probably with that last one, which is to render yourself obsolete. And I think it's the one that we as men struggle with the hardest because, again, this goes back to our earlier conversation. Ego, pride. I want to be involved in everything. I want to do it all. I want to be needed. I want to be important. I want to be special. I want to be acknowledged. I want to be appreciated by other people.
Yeah.
And if I'm not in it, then, well, I'm not important and I'm not being acknowledged and I people don't need me. And that's not a comfortable feeling.
Right.
So what do? We get involved in every little decision. We belittle people. We put people down. We micromanage. We take over projects or take on too much and don't delegate properly. But we really, when I say we, I say I is what I really mean. I need to do a better job at realizing that my actual calling is to put myself out of work, specifically as it relates to my children and people within my organization.
Yeah.
If my kids can't function on their own to some degree now currently and a greater degree as they get older, then I really haven't done my job. And perhaps I have stolen opportunities from them to grow because I was uncomfortable, not because they were, but because I was. Think about a difficult conversation you need to have with somebody. When you don't have that conversation, I know what people say because I say it, or at least think it. Well, I don't want to make that person feel bad, right? That's why we don't have those difficult conversations. But that's not actually why. That's what we say.
Yeah.
But what we really believe, and again, when I say we, I mean what I really believe deep down in my heart of hearts is that I don't want to be in an uncomfortable conversation. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to mess with what's going on right here. I can't handle that. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with the uncertainty and the doubt and the fear and the concern and the stress that comes with whatever is about to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's actually very selfish. It is not selfless leadership. It's selfish. Right. Because, for example, people will say, let's say one of their children really messes up, does something horrible. Yeah. Maybe steal something from the grocery store or something like that.
Yeah.
And or even maybe less important or bad would be, they yell at their mom. And you recognize it as your father. You see it, you recognize it, you know what's going on. And a lot of us will bury our heads in the sand. Like, oh, well, it was his first time doing that. Oh, well, they're tired. They're stressed out. They had a long day. They were at football practice, this, that, whatever. We come up with all these reasons for our kids. And we think, well, I don't want them to feel bad. I don't want them to think I don't love them. I want them to feel important and special. And so we say we're doing it for them. I love them. I don't want them to experience the hardship or the consequence of their choice. I love them. Well, is that the great indicator of love? Or would real love be, what? They need to learn this lesson about stealing and the consequences that come from it. Because if they learn that lesson, then they're going to be better off in the long term. And so now you're being selfless. and you're sacrificing yourself, right? You're sacrificing time, energy, frustration, stress, like all these things that come up when you have difficult conversations. You're sacrificing that precisely because you care about that other individual.
Yeah. And I've actually, not to cut you off, but I've actually just used the words, I love you too much to not address this. Like, I love you too much to let you go out into the world and continue this kind of behavior, because the world won't give you a pass. That's what I try to stress on them. And I think that's, obviously your point is the world doesn't care how you feel. The world doesn't care if you're tired. And by the way, your spouse isn't going to probably either if you lash out at her. So in that context with kids, like, I'm with you, man. I have those hard conversations, and I get the eye roll. I get whatever teenagers give you, but I go right in. I go right into the belly of the beast and face it on, because I know somebody down the road is not going to be so gracious to them if that comes up again, if that behavior, repeats itself.
Yeah. I mean, that's 100% true. I have nothing to add. You're absolutely right on that.
Well, and I wonder, do people shy away? And I want to get your take on why we shy away, other than it's selfish and we don't want to have the heart. But why do we not want to have that? Are we afraid that kid is not going to come to us again? Let's say it's something they come to us and they did wrong, right? And we just kind of want to push it under the rug and be like, okay, well, try harder next time, or whatever. Do we avoid those confrontations because we think it's going to put up a wall between communication with us and our kids? Or is it just as face value, as you said, it's just, we don't want to do something hard?
No, I don't think it's because it will put up a wall. I mean, that might happen, and that might be something on our mind, like, oh, it'll put a barrier between me and my child. But I don't think that's the reason that we do it. I think that might be the outcome of the way we do it.
Okay.
The reason that we do it is ego.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that because, so let's take the wall example. Because if my kid puts up a wall, then I'll feel bad.
Right.
Egocentric. I will feel bad. That's an ego thing. I will feel bad. You didn't say he'll feel bad. You said, I will feel bad.
Interesting.
It's ego. It's like, I don't want to have that conversation because I'll feel bad about hurting their feelings. Okay. Then you're more worried about yourself than you are about them.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to do that. Another one might be because I don't have the time to do it. Your time, are you saying that your time is so valuable that conversation is not worth having? That's ego.
Wow.
You think your time at work, and again, I'm saying you, but I think
Correct.
My time at work is more important than having a conversation with my wife.
Yeah.
Or having a conversation with my child. Or another one. Well, I'd like to talk about this, but my wife and I'll get in an argument about it and she won't understand. Ego. She won't understand me. She doesn't get me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if she only understood what I was going through, she would get it. That's ego.
Wow.
Like, we fall prey to ego so often. It is so prevalent in our lives that we can't even see it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the underlying theme today. As we try to maybe land the plane on this conversation, even though I hate for it to be over, because I mean, you're dropping some serious bombs on us today, and I appreciate it. But so aside from ego, because I've heard you say it indirectly and directly about some of the season you're going through right now, and just kind of checking yourself and asking other people to check you. What would you say is kind of your focus, your focal point right now for growth? I mean, are you, even if it's not just that, like what we just talked about, but maybe it's your spiritual side, your physical side, whatever, trying to get back into shape. What's the kind of the thing you're looking at for most growth for you right now?
Yeah. I was talking with my friend and he says, be careful what you say. He's like, you don't necessarily need to air out your dirty laundry, especially as you're still washing it. And I thought that was a pretty interesting thing. So yeah, I'm still washing my dirty laundry. Right. So, but I will say this, the spiritual element that we've talked about is a huge component. That's really fallen by the wayside for myself and my family too, over the past couple of years. And I feel like I've been a big contributor to that falling off the priority list for us. So that's a big one. Getting in shape, really worrying about what I put into my body. Also making sure that I'm fueling myself correctly, that I am moving my body. I'm down, gosh, over the past month, like 20 pounds I've lost, like getting that back in check. Also really trying to prioritize the way that I spend my time between family and business. And especially as we come into the fall, it's a very busy time of year, but really thinking about how I'm going to lead them moving forward, how I'm going to serve them, and what the balance is between spending time and attention and energy on them, and how much time and attention and energy I give to the business. So those are the key areas that I'm focusing on.
Yeah, that's good. Now, I mean, a lot of us aren't as, I don't want to say fortunate's not the word. We didn't lay the groundwork that you've laid to have some of those solid support structures around us of people that we can go to that'll speak to us like that guy just, kind of spoke to you during this season. So give us one practical step we can take to maybe reach out other than just, hey, dummy, get off the couch, dial the phone, call somebody that you trust and get them to speak into your life. Is there something maybe a little bit more strategic we can do to identify some of those key players and just go get them and give them permission?
I mean, I think we all have them, right? Like we all have them in our lives. We don't really tap. I mean, your wife, that's a great example. A lot of the times we won't go talk with our wives. I've had this conversation with my wife over the past several weeks. It's like, why aren't you sharing things with me? And my motive is good. Like my motive is, I don't want to burden you with it. I don't want you to have to be concerned with it. I'm trying to protect. I'm trying to be, the rock. I want you to see that I'm strong and capable of doing this. And over here, she's like, I just want you to share with me, And so, gosh, there's somebody in your house who loves you, who you can actually just go like, now look, you're not going to bombard her with everything and throw yourself a pity party and ask that she solves it for you. But I think you can express your fears and doubts and worries and concerns and plans and ideas for the future and concerns about the past. Like she probably wants that. And you probably, just based on my own personal observation and her acknowledging this, is like she wants to be involved in that element of your life. So that's something you can do. There's friends that you have in your life that you've actually never tested. There's a couple of friends that I've called over the past several months and kind of explained, some things that I'm dealing with. And I was very hesitant to do that. Again, ego. I'm like, what are they going to think of me? What do they care about what I'm going through? And I tested a few friendships, not like testing them. It's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But I really have put some friendships and relationships to the test over the past month. And I've actually been incredibly surprised and grateful for that. And what's interesting is as I express and air out my dirty laundry, so to speak, I've noticed it also gives them a permission slip to do the same thing with me. So it hasn't been a one-way streak.
True.
It's been two guys sharing their mutual concerns about each other's lives. And that's been very powerful. So I would probably look to your circle and just test the waters a little bit. There might be somebody you already have a good relationship with that you're worrying about the game or the this or the that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And maybe just say, hey, you know what? Can I share something with you, John? Like I'm dealing with this personal struggle, and I don't know if that's something you've ever dealt with or you have anybody in your life that's dealing with that, but man, that's what I'm dealing with. And I trust you. I respect you. Please keep this between us.
Right.
I just wanted to get some feedback from you. What do you think? And you're going to know, like, okay, yeah, he's interested. He's talking to me. He's calling, he's checking in on me. He's giving me, scripture verses to look at and develop some strength from. Okay. That's a guy that's engaged. Cool. You just found out somebody that could really stand by you in a difficult time, and vice versa.
Yeah,
and then you're going to find out other guys are not interested, and that's okay too. They're just a different kind of relationship.
Well, at the very least, you do some information gathering, and you not trim the fat, but you filter where you can go for certain things. But to your point, I've sat in a room full of guys, plenty to know that someone else is probably dealing with something similar. And like you said, you give them kind of a pass by being the word that you love so much, vulnerable. to an extent, and I know we could split hairs on that word, but no, but really, it gives them a pass to sort of be vulnerable back, in a healthy way. But it does, it takes down, it disarms the situation. They're like, oh, thank God somebody else is dealing with that, or whatever. But it's a two-way street, and I think you both benefit. And I think that's great advice, because I'm going to take that, actually test the waters on some relationships and see where you stand, because it may pleasantly surprise you, or it may reveal some things that maybe you were in the dark a little bit about, and you're like, okay, maybe that's not what I thought it was. But either way, you win, I think. So thank you for sharing that.
The only thing I would say, and I'll do this as a last word here with that term, vulnerability. I know we could go all day about that.
I knew you couldn't go without saying something about
it. But I've been rethinking it a little bit.
Really?
I mean, considering it, really spending time thinking about, are we supposed to be vulnerable? And I still think no, not necessarily, but humble is the better word.
Sure.
Humble is the better word. Like realizing that we don't have it all figured out, realizing that we're not as good as we think we are, realizing that we naturally just have the great ability to lie and deceive and to hide and to feel guilt and shame. And then maybe if we were just humble enough to open up a little bit to somebody and say, hey, you know what, John, I'm not doing good. Like have you ever called a buddy and you're like, hey man, I've been thinking about you. How you doing? He's like, good. You're like, okay, good. I just wanted to check in. And then you go back to your same old conversation.
Yep.
Maybe instead of saying good, like when John reaches out, maybe instead of saying, hey man, I'm good, maybe I say, you know what, John, I appreciate you reaching out. I'm actually not doing good, man. Like, here's what I'm dealing with. And share to the degree that you want and you feel comfortable with, to some degree.
Yeah.
But no, man, I'm not doing good right now. This is what I'm dealing with. Based on my own personal observation over the past little bit, I've realized that's forged some stronger relationships, like good relationships I already have, made them better.
Wow.
And helped me work through some things that I can't do on my own. And I don't want to do them on my own. I want to do them with people.
Yeah, 100%. And we're not meant to. By the way, we're not meant to do all that by ourselves. And so appreciate that. I love how you expanded on that a little bit. And I agree with you, the humility and the ego. It's kind of like that sort of that overarching theme today has been. So audience, if you got one thing, it's check yourself and maybe an ego check sometimes, invite others to be part of that process with you, people that you trust, and really get humble and watch what happens. Watch how you might surprise yourself. Ryan, tell us how to get your book. Of course, Amazon. I mean, dumb question, but where can we go to get some other resources that you've got available?
Yeah, wherever you get books, if it's Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever, we'll have them there September 27th. They're available on digital outlets right now as a pre-order. So pre-orders are good too. Outside of that, orderaman.com is our headquarters. You can find all the stuff we're doing, events, merchandise, yada, yada, yada. Iron Council, which is our exclusive brotherhood, and check out the Order of Man podcast. You'll find everything between those three resources.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, any big events coming up?
Yeah, we've got a legacy event. That's a father-son event. That one is the end of September. And then we have a main event, which is Maine, the state main event, which is held here on our property in Maine. And that one's early October. So we got a couple of big events coming up.
Very cool.
And I got a moose hunt right after the main event. So that's a big event too.
Well, I was going to say, you put it all kind of together. I mean, you're launching the book and then you got the event and then you got a hunt. I mean, man, you do it. When you do it big, right? You go big or go home, I guess, for Ryan Michler.
For better or worse. For better or worse.
That's it. Well, hey, love what you're doing, man. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here. You could be doing 100 other things. Appreciate you making time for us. Audience, he's been Ryan Michler. We've been last in line. Be blessed.
Make your escape.